Hi, I'm Bill McLaughlin, Editor-in-Chief of Furniture Today. This week we lost a member of the Furniture Today family with the passing of Jay McIntosh. So we're here in Jay's cubicle where so much of the work that he did over the last 10 years was done, and we're just going to share some of our memories of Jay. Myself, I remember when I first joined the company, probably I'd been here about a month, and Jay, who was responsible for coming up with our news budget for the E-Daily every day, came over with 6 items on a piece of paper, and he asked me how I would prioritize those items. And I can't tell you how pleased I was that he and I agreed on almost all of them. Number 4 and 5 we disagreed on a little bit, but I was very pleased that I at least got the first 3 right. And that was the respect that we all had for Jay's news judgment, was that you always wanted to make sure that you got it right in Jay's eyes.
I don't have a particular one story to tell about Jay, but I just wanted to say what an incredible influence he's been in my life, both professionally and personally. I got to work with him early on double teaming on some retail stories, and he managed to turn what I thought were complex subjects into clear, concise writing, and I try to emulate him. And then personally, I'm sure he complains sometimes, but I rarely ever saw him complain, especially about anything personal. And that's just something I'm striving for, because I'm complaining all the time about things that are personal. And, when he was going through what he was going through the last few months, I was going through something too, much less dangerous. And I was out of work sometimes and struggling, and I felt like telling people about it, but Jay never did. So.
Well, I wanted to share a story about Jay and the movies. As most of you know, he was a movie buff and he went to the theater more times in a month than most people go in a year. But over the time, he developed some fairly strong opinions about movies and movie plots and things. And I remember one actor he just despised was Shia LaBeouf, and I'm never really clear why he despised him. But there was about a year ago, Shia LaBeouf was in a movie with Brad Pitt. The name was Fury, in which Brad Pitt played a World War II tank commander, and Shia LaBeouf was one of the tank crew members. And so since I like World War II stuff, I went to see that movie. And then the following Monday I came in the office and I said, Jay, I saw a movie over the weekend had your favorite actor in it. And so he smiled and said, Shia LaBeouf, right? And I said, yeah. And so then I proceeded to tell him just a little bit about the plot of the movie, because he said he hadn't, said he hadn't seen it yet. And so then after I told him about the plot, he had this really sly grin on his face, and he said, I hope he got killed. and actually he did. So, but Jay hadn't seen the movie yet, so I didn't tell him. So.
Well, one thing I'll remember about Jay is just that clever, understated wit of his. We could see it every week in some of the blurbs that he would write. And I remember it was a month or 2 after I came onto the team, and it had rained for 5 or 6 days in a row, and I made the off-the-cuff comment of, well, when did Greensboro switch places with Seattle? And, Jay, a native of the Pacific Northwest, he just piped up and he said, well, that's actually a misconception. Seattle really doesn't get as much rain on average as, some of the other cities in the country. He was right.
Well, I would have to say, really, as one of the relative newcomers here, early on I would turn stories in, and it got to be a joke after a while that Jay, if I went too long, would remind me that I wasn't getting paid by the word to write the Furniture Today story. Be brief, be brief. And so it came to be that when you would turn something in, if you would get one of 2 calls, either a call and he would say, got a couple of questions about the story, very nicely, or he'd say, story looks good. And when he said story looks good, you had a good day the rest of the day. It was fantastic. So the goal going forward is for the stories to always look good.
Well, I was away from Furniture Today for 9 years, but even during that time, Jay and I stayed pretty close. We got together every quite a bit to go to hike in North Carolina mountains, and every summer until he got sick, we'd spend several days, maybe a week in the Sierra Nevada every year in the back country. And Jay, he didn't like talk about it a lot, but I always knew he was always up for going, despite even knowing how tough it could be. But I remember one year, the second day in, and we were up going to a new area up the Pine Creek Pass Trail. And after the first day, we'd had a real hard day, and he looked down and his boots had started to delaminate on the sole. So I pulled out the duct tape, and he spent the rest of the trip, walking around with these duct tape boots. The next night we went out for a day hike and came back to camp, and he was fixing dinner, and he couldn't get his stove to work, and fortunately I bring this little canister stove that I dragged along every year just as a backup, but we were fixing dinner, and he kind of shakes his head and goes, "Man, I'm glad I didn't bring the tent this year." But it was really great because I had bigger ambitions out there, and I'd come back from a day on the peaks, and you'd have dinner going, the water pumped, and so I could just come back in and kick back, and I'll always miss him out there.